Keanu didn't plan on changing anyone's life that night. He just wanted to say thank you in the only honest way he knew, by cooking dinner himself, lighting a few candles, and hoping Sandra would feel how much he respected her, even if he never found the courage to say it out loud. The city outside was loud and restless, but his apartment felt almost painfully quiet as he moved between the stove and the small wooden table he'd borrowed from a friend. He'd spent the afternoon chopping vegetables, watching old cooking videos, and second-guessing everything, from the menu to the angle of the candles. The pasta sauce simmered slowly, filling the room with warmth, yet his hands still trembled a little as he smoothed the creases from the tablecloth. It wasn't a movie set. There were no assistants, no stylists, no perfect lighting. Just mismatched plates, a bottle of red wine he hoped wasn't terrible, and a man who'd seen more loss than he ever talked about, trying to create one soft, safe evening for a woman who'd always shown him kindness. He thought about Sandra on their first film together, how she'd laughed too loudly at his bad jokes, how she'd remembered every crew member's name, how she always made sure the stunt guys had ice packs and water before she touched her own makeup. On long night shoots, when his loneliness pressed in hardest, she had this way of sitting beside him and talking about nothing and everything, turning the dark parking lot into a place that felt almost like home. Tonight, he wanted to give a little of that back. Nothing romantic, at least not in any way he allowed himself to admit. Just gratitude, friendship, and a quiet corner of the world where neither of them had to be Keanu Reeves or Sandra Bullock for a few hours. As he lit the last candle, the tiny flame flickered against his fingers, and he pulled his hand back, staring at the wavering light. It reminded him of how fragile people were, how careers, relationships, even lives could vanish with one wrong gust of wind. He'd lived through that. He carried those ghosts everywhere. And yet here he was, still showing up, still trying to be gentle in a world that hadn't always been gentle with him. That was his quiet rebellion, to remain kind, even when it hurt. He checked the clock, wiped his palms on his jeans, and told himself not to care so much if this went wrong. But he did care. He cared more than he would ever admit. Sandra hesitated outside his door longer than she expected to. She balanced a small box of pastries in one hand, listening to the muffled sounds of a pan clinking inside. Part of her wanted to laugh. Keanu, cooking, it was such an ordinary thing, and yet nothing about her life felt ordinary anymore. The interviews, the red carpets, the constant questions about who she was dating, who she wasn't, what she weighed, what she wore, it all had a way of shrinking her down, turning her into headlines instead of a person. But Keanu had always treated her like a person. He never asked for gossip. He didn't flirt recklessly or use charm like a weapon. He just saw her. And lately, she'd realized how rare and terrifying that was. She tapped lightly and heard his footsteps cross the floor. For a split second, she wanted to leave, to text him an apology and make up some excuse. She was tired. Tired of pretending she was okay when her chest felt hollow. Tired of protecting everyone else's feelings while quietly ignoring her own. Tired of the way success made her life larger on the outside but so much smaller on the inside. The door opened before she could escape, and there he was, hair slightly messy, shirt sleeves rolled to his forearms, eyes soft with a mixture of surprise and relief. He looked at the pastries, then at her face, as if checking to see if she really wanted to be there. Inside, the candles turned his small dining area into something almost magical. The table was a little crooked, the flowers slightly off-center, and there was a faint smell of something that might have burned earlier. But to Sandra, it looked like the most honest thing she'd seen in months. No stylists, no assistants, just effort, real, imperfect effort. Her chest tightened unexpectedly, and she had to blink faster to keep her eyes from glossing over. He pulled out her chair with an awkward half-smile, the way a shy teenager might, and she caught herself wondering when was the last time someone had done something for her without wanting a favor, a quote, or a photo in return. As they settled in, the conversation started light, memories from their early days on set, stories about clumsy stunts, mispronounced lines, and the time a prop bus almost refused to start during a crucial scene. They laughed genuinely, the sound overlapping with the soft clink of cutlery and the distant hum of traffic below. Every so often, Keanu's gaze would linger on her a second too long, then dart away, as if he was afraid of breaking whatever delicate peace had formed between them. Sandra noticed. She always did, but she didn't push. She let the silence stretch in small places, trusting that if there was anything important he needed to say, he would say it in his own, painfully slow, careful way. The meal surprised her. It wasn't restaurant perfect, but it was comforting, creamy pasta, fresh herbs, and a nervous attention to detail that made her smile. She told him it was good. He frowned and asked if she was just being nice. She put down her fork, leaned forward, and told him she'd had enough fake compliments in her life to recognize the real thing when it deserved to be said. He looked away, almost embarrassed, and there it was again, that humility that made him so different from almost everyone else in their world. He didn't seem to understand the size of his own heart, how it filled the room quietly without performance or noise. As the night deepened, their stories turned heavier without either of them deciding it should. She spoke about the fear behind every new role, the constant voice that whispered she was a fraud, and it was only a matter of time before everyone figured it out. He admitted how often he felt like he was standing just outside his own life, watching it happen instead of living it. He shared pieces of his past he didn't usually open, the losses that had cut through him, the grief that never really moved out. It just learned to sit quietly in the corner until something knocked it awake. Sandra listened, her fingers wrapped around her wine glass, feeling his pain like an echo of her own. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The candles burned lower, pooling wax at their bases, casting softer, more vulnerable shadows. Sandra realized she was holding her breath, afraid that if she moved too quickly, the moment would shatter. She could feel a question rising in her chest, one she both wanted and was terrified to ask, about them, about why they had spent years orbiting each other like two careful planets, always close, never colliding. Her heart pounded with the sudden possibility that this simple dinner might be more than a thank you, more than friendship, more than either of them was prepared to face. She set her glass down, fingers trembling just enough for him to notice. He looked up, meeting her eyes fully for the first time that night, as if he finally understood that something unseen had shifted between them. The air grew heavy, expectant. Sandra opened her mouth, ready to take the risk she'd avoided for years, when a sharp vibration cut through the silence, her phone lighting up on the table beside the candles, flashing a name she hadn't spoken out loud in months. It was her ex's name, the one tied to broken promises, public headlines, and nights spent crying on bathroom floors where cameras couldn't reach. The sight of it snapped her right out of the fragile courage she'd been building. Her chest tightened, and the warmth of the room suddenly felt like it was closing in on her. The phone buzzed again, inching across the tablecloth near the candles. Keanu's eyes flicked to the screen for a second, then back to her face, not prying, just waiting. Sandra reached for the phone with a shaky hand, but instead of answering, she simply flipped it over and pressed it face down on the table. The silence that followed was heavier than any argument. She swallowed hard and let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Sorry," she whispered, forcing a small smile that didn't reach her eyes. He has a talent for showing up exactly when he shouldn't. Keanu didn't ask which he she meant. He'd seen enough tabloids to know. But more than that, he'd seen the way her shoulders tensed whenever someone brought up that chapter of her life. Others treated it like entertainment. He treated it like a wound someone kept ripping open. He leaned back slightly, giving her space, and for a moment he considered making a joke to break the tension. Instead, he did something harder for him. He stayed still and present, allowing the discomfort to exist without trying to fix it. "You don't have to apologize," he said quietly. "Not for somebody else's timing." The simplicity of that sentence cracked something inside her. So many people had demanded explanations, gossip, details, or told her how she should feel, how quickly she should move on. And here he was, not asking anything, not trying to rush her into healing just to make things easier for the people watching. He just let her be. It was such a small kindness. It felt enormous. She laughed once, a short, broken sound. "I thought I was past all of that," she admitted. "The panic, the shaking." She held up her fingers, they trembled slightly. "Guess not." Keanu hesitated, then reached across the table, offering his hand. Not grabbing, not insisting, just offering. She stared at it for a second, then placed her own hand in his, surprised by how steady his felt. His thumb brushed lightly over her knuckles, an unconscious gesture that grounded her more effectively than any breathing exercise. He didn't say it would be okay. He didn't promise things he couldn't control. He just stayed. "You are past it," he said slowly. But scars don't disappear just because everyone else is tired of looking at them. Sandra blinked back a fresh sting of tears. No one ever put it like that. She'd been treating her pain like a performance, something she had to wrap up quickly so people wouldn't lose interest or get uncomfortable. But his words gave her permission to still be healing, even years later, to still be human. She squeezed his hand, feeling something deep inside her shift from brittle to just soft. She drew in a long breath and let it out, this time without shaking. "You know what the worst part is?" she said, trying to steady her voice. "I keep wondering if failing at love in front of the whole world means I deserve another try, like I've used up my chances, and now I'm just supposed to smile prettily and tell everyone how strong I am." Keanu's jaw tightened. "Who told you that?" She gave a small, bitter laugh. "No one had to. It's in every headline, every question that starts with 'after your very public breakup,' like I'm a cautionary tale, not a person." She looked at him, searching his face. "Do you ever feel like the world decided who you are and your only job is to play along?" "All the time," he replied. There was no hesitation. "They decided I'm this unshakable guy who never gets hurt, never gets tired, never gets angry, like I'm made of stone." He shook his head slowly, eyes drifting toward the candles. "But I'm not. I've lost people. I get scared. I overthink everything. I just try not to make my pain someone else's problem." "That's not selfish," she said. "That's kind even when it hurts you." He shrugged lightly, but there was a sadness in his smile. "Sometimes I wonder if I've taken it too far, if I've used not wanting to burden anyone as an excuse to never let people in." His gaze met hers again, a little braver this time. "Especially the ones who matter." The room went still. She knew he wasn't talking about some abstract idea anymore. She was the one he meant, and her heart stumbled at the realization. The safe, familiar label of friends suddenly felt too small for the space between them. She thought of all the years they'd danced around this, hiding behind timing, careers, excuses. Maybe the truth was simpler. They'd both been scared. Scared of ruining something good. Scared of wanting more than the other did. Scared of what the world would say. "Keanu," she said softly, his name catching on something fragile in her throat. "Why did you really invite me tonight?" He held her gaze, and for once he didn't look away. "Because you've always made everyone else feel seen," he answered. "You do it so naturally that I'm not sure you realize how hard it is. I just wanted you to walk into a room and know that tonight it was built for you. Not the version the world thinks you are, just you." Her vision blurred and she didn't bother hiding it. Tears slid down, glistening in the candlelight. "Nobody's ever done that for me," she whispered. "They've thrown parties, premieres after parties, but never this. Never something that didn't need to be photographed." "Then they've been celebrating the wrong things," he said. She laughed through the tears, shaking her head at the tenderness of it. "You realize you're ruining my ability to accept bare minimum from anyone else ever again, right?" "If this is the bare minimum," he replied, "we've all been aiming too low." They fell quiet again, but now the silence felt warm instead of tense. She could sense a crossroads forming between them, like a scene in one of their movies where everything important hung on a single choice. For once, there were no cameras, no director to yell "cut" if they got it wrong. Just two people with more history than they'd ever admitted aloud, deciding whether to stay safe in the comfort of what we've always been or step into the terrifying unknown of what we could be. Sandra's gaze drifted to her phone, still lying face down beside the candles. The decision waiting there suddenly felt smaller. She picked it up, unlocked it, and stared at the string of unread messages. Her ex was asking if they could talk, if they could meet, if maybe things didn't have to end the way they did. Each line sounded more like a trap than an apology. For a moment, old habits tugged at her, this urge to fix, to smooth things over, to prove she wasn't as cold as the tabloids claimed. Then she thought of the quiet kindness in front of her. The man who'd spent his afternoon learning how not to burn pasta, just to say thank you without spectacle. She pressed block on the number before she could talk herself out of it. The confirmation message popped up and her thumb hovered. When she finally tapped yes, it felt like slamming a door in a burning building and walking away with nothing but the clothes on her back. Terrifying, liberating. She set the phone aside and looked at Keanu, exhaling a shaky laugh. "There, I just chose myself in front of another human being," she said. "That's new." He smiled, something proud and gentle shining through. "How does it feel?" Like I'm going to throw up, she replied honestly. Then her smile softened. But also like breathing after being underwater too long. He nodded. That's what courage usually feels like, never as cinematic as people think. Coming from you, that's pretty funny, she said, tilting her head. You know you're the definition of cinematic courage for half the planet, right? Yeah, but that's movie courage, he answered. Real courage is quieter. It looks like blocking a number, or admitting you're still hurt, or showing up to dinner even when you want to hide. You do that more than you know. The compliment settled into her like warmth spreading from the inside out. For the first time in a long time, she believed it. She actually believed she was more than her mistakes, more than her broken pieces. And the realization didn't come from a headline or an award or a standing ovation. It came from a crooked table, overcooked bread, and a man who treated her heart like something worth handling carefully. The night wore on. The candles melted lower, forming little pools of light on the table. They moved to the couch, shoes kicked off, legs tucked under them, talking about everything and nothing. Childhood memories. The first time they'd felt truly alone in a crowded room. The exact moment they each realized fame couldn't protect them from heartbreak. There were pauses where one of them would stare at the floor or ceiling, searching for the right word, and the other waited without impatience. It felt less like a script, and more like building a bridge in real time, board by board, between two distant shores. At one point, Sandra confessed how scared she was of being too much, too emotional, too loud, too needy. Keanu shook his head, earnest. You're not too much, he said. You're just used to people who give too little. The sentence hit her so hard she had to close her eyes for a second. Something inside her, a younger version of herself who had shrunk over and over again to fit into other people's comfort, stood up a little taller. She didn't say anything, but he could see the change in her posture, the subtle easing of tension around her eyes. Eventually, the clock on his wall crept toward midnight. She knew she had an early call time. He knew he did too, but neither of them moved. Leaving felt like breaking a spell they weren't quite ready to release. At last, she sighed and slipped her feet back into her shoes. I should go, she said, standing slowly, before I start asking you to make dessert just to have an excuse to stay. You realize dessert would probably be a disaster, he pointed out, standing too. Exactly, she smiled. That's why I'd remember it. They walked to the door together, the hallway outside dim and quiet. She turned to face him, suddenly unsure of how to say thank you for something that felt so much bigger than one evening. Her instinct was to make a joke, to lighten the moment, but for once she resisted it. She wanted to honor what this night had been. She searched for the right word and failed. Important, she finished softly, more than you know. I think I know, he said, because it was important for me too. They stood there in that narrow space between goodbye and what if. She could feel the old patterns tugging, say good night, buddy, give him a friendly hug, walk away, pretend this was just like any other evening. Stay safe, stay small, keep the world simple, but then she remembered blocking that number, choosing herself, opening up. Maybe this night wasn't about romantic cliches or perfect endings. Maybe it was about taking one more step toward living honestly, even if it scared them both. So she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him, not in the quick, half-hearted way of industry hugs, but fully, firmly, like she meant it. He froze for a heartbeat, then held her back just as fully. It wasn't fireworks or music swelling in the background. It was better. It was two wounded, resilient people finding a moment of stillness in each other's arms. When they finally pulled apart, she didn't let the moment dissolve into awkwardness. I'm not promising I know what any of this means yet, she said, voice low and honest. But I am promising I won't run from it, not from you, not from this. His eyes softened with something that looked a lot like relief. I'm not asking for promises, he replied. Just, let's not keep pretending we don't care more than we say. She nodded, deal. She turned and walked down the hallway, feeling strangely lighter, like she'd left more behind than just an empty plate and a half-finished glass of wine. Each step felt like a quiet rebellion against every voice that had ever told her she wasn't allowed to want more. From others, from herself, from life. At the elevator, she pressed the button and glanced back. Keanu was still standing in the doorway, watching her with that same steady, patient gaze he'd had all night. She lifted her hand in a small wave. He mirrored it, a faint, hopeful smile tugging at his lips. The elevator doors slid open, and she stepped inside, heart pounding, not with fear this time, but with possibility. As the doors closed, she realized something. The night hadn't changed everything because they'd suddenly become a couple or declared their love in some dramatic speech. It changed everything because, for the first time in a long time, they'd both chosen courage over comfort, honesty over performance, and quiet, persistent kindness over the noise of the world. Back upstairs, Keanu blew out the candles one by one, the room slipping into darkness. He could still smell the pasta, still hear her laughter echoing faintly in the silence. For a moment, doubt crept in. Had he done too much, not enough, the wrong thing entirely? Then he remembered the look on her face when she blocked that number, the way her shoulders had finally relaxed, the strength in her voice when she said she wouldn't run. He exhaled a small, satisfied breath and allowed himself the rare luxury of hope. Maybe this wasn't the beginning of a love story the world would cheer for in headlines and interviews. Maybe it was something quieter, slower, deeper. Two people both scarred and soft, learning that resilience didn't mean shutting down and humility didn't mean disappearing. That kindness, to others and to themselves, could be the bravest thing they ever chose. And somewhere between the last candle going out and the first light of morning creeping over the city, they both lay in their separate homes, staring at their ceilings, replaying each moment of that dinner. Not with regret, but with the tender, terrifying awareness that a single night, lit by too many candles and an almost burned meal, had nudged their lives onto a different path. One where they were finally allowed to want more, and slowly, gently, start believing they deserved it.